everyone, Assalamu-aleykum. My name is Fahan, and you're listening to the Nisa Invest Tea Talk podcast. Hope everybody's feeling good, ready to start your Friday. Alhamdulillah, it's Jummah today. And we're here to recreate something that happened earlier this year at my own local mosque, where a group of us got together on a Friday to talk all things personal finance. Whether it had to do with budgeting, halal investing, pensions, we covered all of it. And at the end of the session, I asked my sisters to leave me with their questions so that I may continue the conversation with you in podcast form. So thanks so much for joining me. And let's get started. So in today's episode, I've got a question for you that we will tackle, and I'm going to dive straight in and read it out to you. So the question was, how to invest with your business profit in a halal way. So there's the question. I'll just bring it up. Written in green, it says, how to invest with your business profit in a halal way. And when I read this question at the time, and then I read it again in preparation for this episode, the overwhelming thought that I had was, mashallah, I love how self-aware the sister who asked this question is, because even though that entire evening I kept going on about getting yourself used to budgeting, building up your emergency fund, and start to invest in the long term, and do so in a halal, tax efficient way. So that's the message that I was leaving everybody that evening. But in reality, it is very true that as an entrepreneur, the same rules don't apply in exactly that same way. Because as an entrepreneur, you're not only responsible for your own personal finances, but also your business finances. So I've made some notes so that we can go through the best practices of how an entrepreneur should go about thinking about the same topics. And as I was preparing for this episode, I realized that in actual fact, perhaps personal finance is even more important if you are an entrepreneur, because it is more challenging as a business owner. And if we compare a salaried employee to someone who runs their own business, we know that first of all, you don't have the reliability of a steady paycheck. You've got variable income. Businesses tend to have variable income. And then on top of that, topics such as tax and retirement are kind of, in some ways, but not entirely, taken care of for you, and certainly more so than somebody who runs their own, who's self-employed. And so, realizing that perhaps automation and saving this regularly might pose somewhat of a challenge as an entrepreneur, hopefully it's also what we're solving for is more rewarding, because as a business owner, you're not only having your business act as an income generator for you, it's also a financial asset that you're growing. So ultimately, the goal is to be able to have a financial foundation that is rock solid, with the view of making your business thrive for the long term. And so when it comes to, so I've thought about several best practices that we can go through. And so the first one might sound incredibly intuitive, but I'll read it out, and that is to separate your personal and your business finances. And the reason for that is, yes, on the one hand, operationally, it is obviously a lot easier to separate your inflows and outflows if you know what is a business expense relating to something that is a personal expense. It can help you with your bookkeeping and know what it is, what's a valid expense and what's not. But perhaps the reason I want to start with this is my next point, which is that as an entrepreneur, you want to be thinking about how is it that you will be paying yourself. And the natural instinct, I am sure, is to think, well, what do you mean? How am I going to pay myself? Of course, I'm going to try to forgo a salary for as long as possible because I'm growing a business. And that is very sound advice. It's true that it is very tempting to think, you know what, I need to make sure that I'm focused on making sure the business is a success. But we don't want to do that and at the same time neglect our personal finances, because the quicker that you can start to think of yourself as having a business that's responsible for paying a salary to you, I feel like that is something that's going to help you further down the line, because it sets you up with the right sorts of habits to begin with. And it helps you think about your salary as an expense rather than something that is an afterthought after everything else is being taken care of. And when it comes to personal finance, I like to talk a lot about being intentional with what you're doing. And so intentionally thinking about perhaps a percentage of a revenue every month that you will take from your business, it is a sensible thing to think about. And mind you, it can be incredibly modest as well. But just the fact that you are taking a regular amount out of your business that counts as a salary is very helpful, especially because it brings me on to my next point, which should come as no surprise to anybody who knows me personally, and that is having emergency savings. And when it comes to having an emergency fund and what cash means, it definitely means something different to whether you're an entrepreneur or not. And what's super exciting is that as an entrepreneur, you get to have two emergency funds. One, of course, for your business, but then also one for yourself. And when it comes to the emergency fund and the cash that you keep inside of your business, of course, you know that more than I do. I can't possibly advise you on that, or to be fair, I have an informed opinion on it, because of course that will differ depending on the kind of sector you are in and what the cash flow looks like generally across the year and the level of seasonality there is in your business. So yes, you might want to be in a position where you're keeping a certain number of months of payroll going inside your business so that you can cover that. But I'm talking about you as an individual. And so an entrepreneur, their emergency fund indeed is different. And you probably know this, which is that cash is king. And it's especially the case for the self-employed. So while someone who is taking regular income, their emergency fund might be 3 to 6 months. What we're saying with entrepreneurs is that it should be at least a year. And why is it that that's the case? Is because if we stop and think about what the emergency fund is there for in the first place, one such use of an emergency fund might be to change jobs. And so if you are a salaried employee, maybe someone who has qualifications that are recognized across an industry, or just someone who has highly marketable skills, 3 to 6 months might just very well be how much you need to, leave your job and then find another one without, impacting your budget. But for an entrepreneur, of course, it is different. So having a year is effectively what you need to replace any loss of income that you might suffer in your business for as long as possible. And so what we're doing is effectively separating what is happening in the business and the impact that it has on me personally. Because if we go back to our original goal, and that was to ensure that we are able to pursue our venture for as long as possible, irrespective of any downturns, etc. And so the last thing that you want is to have to close shop because of a cash crunch. And why is it more important to think about this today? And I want to talk about inflation for a second. We could be incredibly tempted to think, but how am I going to keep a year's worth of expenses to the side? I mean, that is going to lose so much value. But we have to think everything has a price, first of all. And what your emergency fund is doing for you as an entrepreneur is effectively doing great things for your business itself, because it is guaranteeing that the boss is not going to suddenly have to leave the company and it having to fold because of an emergency. And so over the years, I have to say that my emergency fund has become the favorite thing about my financial plan, because it bets on you. It's something that it is an investment in yourself. You're telling your business, look, I have a year's worth of cash in the coffers, and so I'm not going anywhere. And you're able to think long term, and you're able to, inshallah, carry on. And so my next point is about where is it that you start when it comes to investing personally as an entrepreneur. And that is with retirement. And so you might have another plan for yourself. You might be thinking, but Fahan, I'm going to sell my business before I retire. And that's what's going to fund my retirement. Or I might have other people running it, or all sorts of things. You might be passing it down to your children. That you might think that is a substitute to having a traditional pension. But in reality, what's amazing is that as an entrepreneur, you have much more flexibility when it comes to planning for retirement. And in practical terms, what we're saying is, how is it that you can start to invest as an entrepreneur in a tax-efficient way? And the most tax-efficient way to start with is by thinking about opening some type of pension as a self-employed individual. And this brings me to talk about perhaps one of my favorite inventions, which is the self-invested pension plan. So as a self-employed person, you have access to what's called a SIP in the UK, which stands for Self-Invested Pension Plan. It is so great that honestly, it almost makes me want to be an entrepreneur just so that I could have one, which of course is an incredibly twisted way of thinking about things. But that is really just to emphasize that pre-tax savings are entirely an option for the self-employed, and it doesn't even have to be complicated. If anything, it's even easier than having to deal with the bureaucracy of figuring out exactly what percentage I should be saving to make the most of my employer match, etc. What happens with your self-invested pension plan is that whatever salary it is that you pay yourself, and let's just talk, I use the word salary specifically because, of course, you might be thinking, but Fahan, there is no such thing as a salary. The whole thing is mine. So, whether it's a salary or how that money comes to me, I don't really think of it in that sense, and it's true. It's purely just a technical point. So when you do pay yourself a salary and it comes into your account that way, you have the opportunity to open a self-invested pension plan, and anything that you put into it is pre-tax, which means that you won't be subject to income tax in the traditional sense. So that's really, I think, the extent of the simplicity of the best practices that I was going to flag in this episode, because my last point was more to do with ensuring that as a self-employed individual, you have a great team around you to advise you in this journey. Because what you don't want to do is feel in any type of way overwhelmed by the having to think about tax and pensions, etc. Because that's what your accountant or financial planner is there to help you deal with. So your accountant, in the strictest sense, at the very least, what they're going to help you with is figure out what the most efficient salary is to pay yourself. Like, what's the most tax efficient way for me to pay myself from my business? And the reason that exists is because you're not only an employee, of course, you're also a director of the company. And what that means is that you're not only eligible to receive a salary, but you're also eligible to receive what's called a director's dividend. And dividends can be paid on a monthly basis. So in reality, what's a dividend and what's like pay as you earn, PAYE income, really technically doesn't differ. But the benefit of that, of course, is it allows you to make the most of the fact that you are self-employed. I have to say that because these rules keep changing, because some topics you can just be unfamiliar with, some things become more relevant to you as you grow older, I find that getting this help is also beneficial to those who do have a salaried income. So last year I got help from a financial planner specifically to talk about pensions. And in preparation for this episode, I reached out to her and to have a chat. And while we were talking, I did ask her how is it that she works with her self-employed clients. And I was surprised by what she said, because she told me that, everybody is different. And it's true. Everybody's different. And so she has clients that literally just talk to her, and she's a financial planner. And what's great about financial planners is that they don't only think about your business as maybe an accountant might do, but they also think about you as a person and your personal situation too. Anyhow, she said that she's got some clients who maybe reach out to her at the end of the tax year just to be like, how's my pension looking? Should I top it up? That type of stuff. Or she has some people who literally have a fully fledged accountant, so they have like very little use for her. Or she might have people who do their own bookkeeping and therefore need some extra help. So getting tailored advice can be hugely beneficial. And if anything, these are individuals that perhaps will be in your corner throughout the life of your business and throughout your career. That is just so helpful to have somebody who you can, even if you might feel like my business might be too small, or I still have my job on the side, perhaps my message is to seek this advice sooner rather than later. That it's never too early to do so. knowledge is power, right? So we don't know what we don't know. And so ultimately, having the people there to help us in our journey can help us make more empowered decisions, because what you want to be doing as an entrepreneur is focus on your craft, which is to create value and serve your customers, etc. That's perhaps my last piece of, let's call it the fourth best practice, which is to have a great set of advisors, and think about how is it that you might start to have at least a conversation with someone. And while I love, how might you do that? If you have a group of entrepreneur friends, ask them how is it that they manage their finances, who they speak to. If you're looking for an actual website, in the UK there's this website called unbiased.co.uk, and that's a service that you can use to get professional services advice for individuals, self-employed, as well as just someone who needs help with their somebody who maybe is not even self-employed that wants that kind of advice. So another thing I wanted to do with these questions was make sure that I'm taking them as literally as possible. And so if I read the question again, it says how to invest with your business profit in a halal way. And that got me thinking that investing in your business in many ways is investing in yourself. And so if you are an entrepreneur, you might want to invest in working with a business coach, thinking about reflecting on what area of your business you think that their advice might help improve it even more, and make you a better leader, or help you improve your expertise in one particular area. I find that getting any type of third-party advice can help you build even more self-awareness, and ultimately your ability to learn and improve can become your biggest strength. So one thing I wanted to say, and perhaps counterintuitively for someone who is obsessed with personal finance and making sure people are investing for the long term, your best investment might very well be in yourself. So that's one thought that I wanted to leave you with as well. Please do let me know your thoughts on anything that I covered on this episode. Perhaps as an outro, I wanted to say that, entrepreneurship, mashallah, it's such a amazing endeavor. You might have always wanted to build your own business pretty much since you were young, or you might have had to build a business because your circumstances required that, or you might be someone who kind of fell into entrepreneurship because you have an undiscovered passion that you're pursuing. Whoever it is that you are listening, and in whichever way this applies to you, thank you for what it is that you do, and ultimately, as Muslim, what drives us to want to pursue something like this is to benefit the ummah, and so may Allah be with you in doing so, and I wish you all the best. Thank you very much for your question. I have been Fahan Ibrahim Hashi. You're listening to the Nisa Invest Tea Talk podcast, and I will see you next Jummah. Bye for now.